Sony Handy Personal AM table radio. I found this high up on a shelf at my friend's mine complex. Probably been unused for 25 or 30 years, baking away in the desert heat, and this is another cabinet that's just completely turning to dust from heat, and probably early plastics are not that good, but I think this is interesting enough to resurrect. I don't know if I want to say it's rare. I have never seen one of these. That doesn't mean it's not rare, but I think what I'm going to do is do a little research on eBay, but you can see they're Sony Handy Personal. And like I say, it is baked. And it looks like it ran on D-cell batteries. I believe there's a lot missing here, but I think there's enough to resurrect. I mean, this is just grilled. I don't know what this is. I don't have a model number on this at all, but this is very early Sony. Can we make it work again? I hope so. Let me do a little quick research and see if I can find anything like this. It'd be nice to be able to reference it and get a schematic for it. Probably just got open electrolytics and then it'll probably work. I would imagine the electrolytics are completely just baked out, beyond baked. That's the word here, baked. This even has like a gear reduction tuning dial set up. Not that you could see it from the front. And I like that right there. Seven transistors. See what information we can find and make it play again. So someone had definitely been in here, because we got missing screws, we got rat or mouse damage here. Some of the wires connecting to the antenna up here are broken. Looks like it goes yellow, green. Let's see if I can get in there a little. Well, this appears to be it right here. And yes, this one did have a handle on it. You can see right there was a handle on top of it. So it is a TR712, and according to this was released in 1959. So let's see what else I can find. TR712. Boy, did it look good when it wasn't baked. Okay, I found a PDF file here from Vintage Radio. Looks like a magazine. And Sony's little mantle set, the TR712, was a major step forward in performance for transistor radios. Previous models from Sony and other companies could only be regarded as having average sensitivity at best. Sony changed the game with this 7 transistor set. So there's a whole article here with schematics. This has got all the factory schematics and everything. So let me read through this. If there's something that won't bore everybody to death, then boy, this is a whole like 8 or 9 pages on. I guess I could. Wow, there's a lot here. Stand by. Okay, this article goes into frequency response and sensitivity curves and selectivity and modifying the audio output to lower the harmonic distortion and how the AGC works and all kinds of stuff. I'll include a link in the video description below to this article if anybody's interested in really reading about this radio, the technical details. I'm just going to resurrect it. Let's just make it play again. It's not worth hooking up to some $1 million analyzer in the condition it's in because it's baked. I have 6 volts applied through the amp meter here. I have the fluke on current. I soldered the green wire back on that was broken off the antenna, so here we go. Turned it on and the bird went nuts. I do hear a little crackle pony there. Seems like, I don't know, that'd be 10 milliamps. That's not really enough. There is a little noise from the speaker there, so obviously the output transistors are getting power. So here's the deal. I was looking at the schematic, and all those electrolytics are simply in the audio output circuit. And I don't know if this is going to really show up. I don't like doing stuff like this, but you can see it comes directly out of the IF transformer, through the detector diode, and then into the volume control, and then all your electrolytics are over here in the amp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pop the signal tracer on the volume control here, and we shall see if the receiver portion is active. It appears it is not. That's me turning the power on and off to the set. That's just the signal tracer picking up KNX on its own. All you need to pick up KNX is a detector of some sort. So, no, the front end is not working. The receiver is not picking anything up. So I noticed that some of these red, I believe they're capacitors, are cracked. You can see it with a magnifying glass on top. So the first thing that needs to happen is I need to dig the SAMs out, get a readable schematic, then pull the circuit board, do a full visual inspection, make sure there's no cracks in the board. no rat damage anywhere else, and start taking some voltage measurements. I think might be the easiest way to do this. We know the electrolytics are bad in the audio output section, but if we have something like a bad IF transformer or something like that, there's no point in recapping the audio output section. So we should get the IF and the converter working first so that it's tuning stations in with the signal generator, and then go on to the recapping. So I'm going to dig this SAMS up and get that photocopied so we have something to reference. It's clear to look at, and then we'll do some voltage measurements and see what's going on. Here's the SAMS, and it's from 1961. What I did is I just photocopied the schematic so we have nice reference material, and then I took pictures of the parts layouts with the phone where I don't waste the paper. Ships registry Malta. Okay, this thing runs on 4.5 volts, not 6 like I was running it on, and it specifies 22 milliamps. I believe I saw that here. I'm sorry, it specifies 30 milliamps, and I have it hooked up to the 4.5 volts on the B&K 970 transistor equipment analyst, and it's measuring about 10 milliamps, so it's way under. So let's do some voltage checks. It shows these all as NPN transistors, so was Sony that cutting edge in 1961 that they were using all NPN transistors? That's pretty cutting edge. And yes, I did change cameras because I think this one's, I can get in a little bit closer on the handheld stuff with this one. So we have a colored dot and then collector base emitter. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check this one. You can see the colored dot right there. That is the, should be a 2T73, the converter. So let's see what our voltages are. Okay, it should be 3.8, 1.7, and 1.8. A 4.2 on the collector, so that's high. Should have 1.7 on the base. We have 0.5 on the base, so that's low. Should have 1.8 on the emitter. We have 0.3 on the emitter. So that base bias voltage that's low, and if that's low, this will be high because this won't be turned on, and that'll be low because it won't be flowing through here. That 1.7 volts comes from a voltage divider here, 10K, and then a 22 to ground. It should be isolated off with this 10,000 picofarad. That could be leaky, because if that was leaky, it would short to ground. That could be leaky, that could be high, that could be low. I don't think this, because if this was off, if this was leaky, this would be high, and this is low, and this is low, and that's high. So it's like this thing's not being turned on, not leaky. Let's try one of these. So 2.8, 0.5, and 0.4. Instead of 2.8, we have 0.8, way low. Instead of 0.5, we have 0.6, not that far off. For 0.4, we have 0.4. So I'm starting to see a pattern here, which is that this 2.8 source that feeds this, which is way low, is also the same 2.8 that feeds this, which is way low. So this 2.8 must be missing or something. So that should come from our power supply circuit here. Maybe what we have is we have a shorted capacitor. You would think the current draw would be high, not low, if that was the case. Unless this is just used for a bias voltage. So I wonder where that guy is, R9. Okay, right now I have my meter clipped on to the positive right there of C6, 2.8 volt source, which is that capacitor right there. I'm measuring 0.8. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to snip this guy out of here. It's more likely that the capacitor is bad than the resistor is off. So here we go. And I snipped the capacitor out and the voltage didn't change. I just ruined a perfectly good 55-year-old capacitor. Okay, I suspected for a minute this capacitor right here, maybe loading this down, and that capacitor's on the bottom. So what I did is I went and checked the 3.8 volt source, and I got to it here on the second IF amp. And all these voltages, the 3.8 comes up here, all these voltages on this transistor are good, because it's getting its voltage from the 3.8. This one back here is getting it from the 2.8. So it's gotta be that resistor is open. Well, it doesn't gotta be. Let me see, gotta be. That's... So that 2.8 volt source comes here through this transistor. Yeah, if this transistor is leaky loading this down, then this voltage here would be high. It's got to be this resistor. I'm sorry, not that resistor. The dirty green carpet resistor with solder blobs. It's got to be this 5600, which is, or one of the IF cans is leaky. That's the 5600 right there. Alright, I'm measuring the voltages on the back of the board, and I only have 0.8 on both sides of that resistor. And I'm wondering if there's a broken trace right there, because that right there is the capacitor, and I got 4.5 volts there, which is the 3.8 source. And I think I see where there should be a little bridge trace right there in the middle of the screen that might be burnt away. Might be a victim of rat piss. On second thought here, maybe not. Maybe it is the resistor. Because what I do is I take a big bright light and I shine it through the board. And that way I can see where the components are. And it appears that the drop is across the resistor. So let me get that resistor out. You know, if the resistor is bad, that would set a record for this channel. I don't think I've replaced a resistor on anything to get it working before in any videos. Maybe a color TV, but not a little radio like this. Okay, I got one lead of it pulled out and it's measuring 5.5K. So it's not the resistor. What is going on here? Okay, where the only place this voltage goes that could load it down like that is right here. And this voltage is not high, and this voltage is not high. Because if this was leaky, yeah, this would pull down, but it would pull down and this would come up. Because that's 560 ohms. And it would be a 10-to-1 division, right? So, yeah. I think what needs to happen is, it could very well be this transformer is shorting to ground inside. I could pull this transistor out. That would isolate this off. I could cut this trace. I removed the transistor and the voltage came up, and look at how this transistor checks. 2 diodes. What I've done is I've soldered in, I cut up an IC socket and I soldered in I cut up an IC socket and I installed the 3 female pins in there so we can experiment with the transistor. Being an NPN germanium, these are kind of rare, and I think I might have some Russian NPN germaniums, but I'm going to have to do a lot of searching. NPN germanium RF transistors were not super common. Okay, this looks like a NPN silicon. Here's what I've done with this. Now that the voltages are right and that 2.8 volts isn't loaded down anymore, I tried the signal tracer on the base of the first IF transistor, and there still was no tuning, no reception at all, and you should be able to pick up something at least tuned through probably KNX and maybe KFI, the 2 stronger stations. So I pulled the converter transistor out and I tested it in here, and I also checked it with a meter and it's dead. So I pulled another transistor out and it's dead too. And that would explain the low current drain, is that none of the transistors are conducting. They're just all bad. And these are very early transistors. And it's really quite fascinating that they are NPN transistors in this set, NPN germanium transistors, which it's going to be almost impossible to find them. I think NTE covers a few different, maybe an RF and a low power audio NPN germanium, but these are just not going to be available. So I think I'm going to have to concede defeat on this set. I've never had to do that before on a Resurrection, but this is a very unique Resurrection, and these parts are just not going to be available. So it's not worth the effort with the case all cracked and that. But at least we were able to diagnose it down to bad transistors. If they were PNP germanium, I have tons of them, and I would fix it. But this is a little going to be too much of a challenge to be worth it. That's an MP37, Mike Paul 37 Russian NPN germanium. I actually did have some of those, and I soldered it in place of the converter, and the converter is sort of working now. If I
더 자세한 내용은 www.jespree.com을 통해 확인할 수 있습니다.
Oh, Desperado. Alright, that's enough of that. The copyright police will go after me. So that's just it. All the transistors are bad in this thing, all the capacitors, and finding the right transistors to reestablish the performance on something that's in this condition would be foolish. So anyway, there's a look at a 19 Sony. Let me straighten that out for the indexing. That was a look at an early 1960s Sony model TR712. Sony model TR712 mantle radio. AM mantle radio, AM table radio, AM only 4.5 volt 3D cell powered biodegradable crumbling baked radio that's now going in the parts bin. So as not to totally give up, I decided I'd do a few additional checks. This is the detector diode on diode check, and I'm going to reverse the leads here, and the detector diode looks good. This direction we're measuring the volume control because the detector diode and the volume controller in parallel. So we have the 5K volume pot. And this side we have the 0.28 germanium diode. This is using the audio function generator going into the volume control. You can hear it starts to clip right there. That's about 100 milliamps. On the 0 to 200 milliamp scale, if I go down to the 20 milliamp scale, so it seems the audio section is working, and of course I don't know how hot it is compared to how hot it should be, but it appears it's working, and these 4 transistors, the 2 outputs, the driver and the AF amp are working, and all the capacitors are at least not totally open. Now I'm using the RF output out of this, which it's too bad the pointer broke off, but I'm about on 455 right now. And I'm fed into the base of the second IF amp, and it seems to be working. Again, I don't know if it's as hot as it should be, but okay, that's dumping into the collector of the first audio amp, which would be dumping into right here. So that's passing through that IF transformer into the second IF amp. That's going into the base of the first IF amp, which I put an MP37 NPN Russian germanium in there. And I have the RF level on minimum now. It's as far down as it'll go. I still don't know if we have all the gain we should due to these old transistors, that I still think there might be a couple defective ones. I've changed my mind on resurrecting this, and it's okay to change your mind 10 minutes before the show. Okay, well today the converter transistor is measuring as a NPN with a diode across it, so maybe the converter is not bad. And I was looking at the schematic, and you can see we have on the antenna should have 6 wires. We should have ground, and then 1 going to the capacitor, and then we should have 2 going to the circuit board. And so this right here, this 0.4 ohm coil external antenna connector, that's this coil over here. Well, this shows 4 wires should be coming off of this coil, and there's only 3. And I only have continuity between, but where does the other one connect here? One goes directly to the base. I'm gonna have to start ohming this all out. Okay, so green and yellow, that's making continuity, and that is this coil right here. So I'm missing this wire right here, the top that connects to the capacitor. Shut up. So you can see right there, the wire is missing from there. Oh, is that where it goes right there? Is that where it's broken off from? Microsurgery time. That wire was not there in the beginning of this video. That's my fault. I overlooked that. I make mistakes, and I don't edit them out. I could make myself look really damn good, but that's not reality. When you're working on stuff like this, especially resurrections that somebody else has been into that's broken and the screws are missing, you know, I could just break this off. And so there it is. There's the broken off wire. That was not there when I originally opened this project up, so my bad for overlooking it. So let's get that hooked up. Let's get everything hooked up. I put the sockets in here for the converter. Let's see if we can make this thing play again. Okay, I've been playing with it. I fixed this wire here to the antenna, and I got the oscillator section hooked up. And I tried the MP37 and I got nothing. But when I put the original one back in there, it acts as a kind of a TRF set. The oscillator's not running, but it will get KNX here.
The two trusted news brands, CNN and Bloomberg. Bloomberg TV and radio when you download the radio.com app for your smartphone. Download it now or listen on your smart speaker.
Play your perfect combination. Give me a round of golf, a round of drinks, and a round of blackjack. Ice cold martinis and hot juicy steaks. Whatever you love to do, you'll find
Try an experiment.
De nuestro país y nuestra comunidad.
Okay, I put the original IF transistor in that tests totally bad, and it still works better than the MP37. I don't understand that.
Estamos listos para proteger.
Boy, did I get this thing wrong. These transistors are still bad. I took and flipped these two transistors. This was the one that was in the converter. This was the IF one that all the voltages were testing wrong on, and it's actually working with that transistor that by all signs shows bad in the converter section.
Nerve-wracking weekend for many illegal immigrants across Southern California after word that ICE agents plan to start a big roundup operation tomorrow morning. Officials say the raids will specifically target about 2,000 people.
Mucho gusto de estar aquí con ustedes para traerles mucha información al respecto de problemas dentales que quizás ustedes tengan.
A ver, cuéntanos, Elenita, un poco de todos los servicios dentales que ofrece California.
That's great.
Claro que
That's
sí,
like two stations coming over each other, covering the same topic in two different languages.
Un relleno y una simple limpieza a algo más complicado como los implantes si es que sufren de dientes perdidos. Por eso es de que aquí California Tantra Group en este momento, Manny, estamos...
So, very lackluster sensitivity. Just picks up KNX and a couple of the very strongest stations.
He's a former special agent in charge for ICE Homeland Security investigation.
Moving people from the U.S. to final order. It's always been a...
I guess I could change that capacitor right there and see if it made any difference. You know, I don't get this. Earlier in this video, we checked all these voltages on here, and they were all off. Now with those transistors back in the circuit, all the voltages are perfect. I don't get this thing, and the transistors still don't test right. The capacitor is back in circuit. So as of right now, all I've done is wasted a hell of a lot of time and ended up discovering this wire was missing and hooking it back up. So I don't know. I can't align these because they're filled with wax. I can't tweak these. I did adjust these and peak them as best I could. But I'm at a complete loss why this transistor was like shorted and loading the voltage down, and then I let it sit for a week Well, I did kind of let it sit in a hot area, and I don't know. This is one of those mysterious electronic things that just wants to screw your brain up. And the performance is still pretty bad, and I'm looking at this, and I tested that capacitor, I tested these capacitors, they're perfect. I tried jumping them, they're fine. I'm just at a total loss where the performance issue is, except probably the electrolytics are a little dried out, and these two transistors I don't think are right, even though they're working.
An LA tourist got an unpleasant surprise at a Westchester restaurant this week where a rat fell from the ceiling. Alicia Norman, who's visiting from Houston, tells CBS 2 she was watching Women's World Cup soccer at Buffalo Wild Wings when it happened.
We're having adult beverages, and we hadn't even ordered yet.
Adult beverages?
And we hear a noise. And so our eyes go up because we hear the noise, and then all of a sudden a rat comes down. And so we didn't move right away because we were just kind of in shock.
She says the manager scooped up the rat and dumped it into a garbage bag. The restaurant blames the incident on the nearby construction project and says it's going to remain closed indefinitely for cleaning and sanitation. The leader of an international church accused of sexually abusing young girls remains in jail on $50 million bail.
Lawyers for
Now we're dealing with bad capacitors.
The church argued to have his bail reduced. Attorney Kenneth Rosenfeld.
Our client shouldn't be treated any differently than
I can't see this holding the camera, but yeah, if I bridge these capacitors, they're all dead. What I did is I pulled a bunch of capacitors off this board. I got 4 10 microfarad and 3 47 microfarad. I tested them here. They're all good. I'm just going to parallel them across the capacitors that are already in the radio.
Says car companies and dealerships should do a lot more to help drivers understand the systems and how they're not meant to take
Here we go.
actual driving.
Like I said,
His mind again, immigration raids that were scheduled.
I'm just going to put the capacitors on the bottom. That way I don't ruin the look of this circuit board and this beautiful, pristine radio.
And another horse has died at Santa Anita the 30th since December. More News 3 minutes is 3:27.
Are you a victim of the UCLA gynecology scandal?
Yes. Wonder if the copyright thing can get that when there's literally 2 radio stations and 2 songs running over the top of each other. The same station's coming in 3 places. What a trip. This has got to be that screwed up converter transistor.
Is promoting a new desktop workspace and updates to its website and mobile app to combine different files, work software, and teams of employees. Dropbox wants to take over even more of the market that's dominated by Microsoft and Google. But Morningstar says it's not the only one, and the tech giants are working on it too.
This is a trip. Literally every station, there's 2 stations on top of each other.
Microsoft and Google.
And then that's it. The oscillator just stalls out. What a trip.
Of all the apps on your smartphone, only one gives you breaking news from all over Southern California, plus the KNX traffic.
Oh yeah.
버스 프리덤의 노래와 연주 9 to 5 모닝 트레인 전드리면서 저는 여기서 또 인사드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 4시 스포츠 연예 파노라마가 이어집니다. 자, 내일 오후 2시에 다시 찾아뵐게요. 주말 매일은 지금까지
We're now listening to Sheena Easton Morning Train, the Elevator Music Edition. I'm sorry, the Japanese karaoke edition, Morning Train Japanese karaoke edition. See if Google can identify this. Come on. What song is this? Oh, got it. Crap, that means YouTube's gonna tag it. What song is this? Yeah, it's getting it. There's a resurrection of a Sony TR712 in very bad shape. I have the right to change my mind, which I did, and I brought it back to sort of life 10 minutes before I put it in the trash, so it was not condemned to die. This thing is really funky with these transistors that weren't working and weren't measuring as transistors, and then started working and started measuring as transistors. I guess the bottom line with this is there's something funky with those transistors, which are very touchy as far as needing the correct replacements for it to work right, especially the converter stage, and that wire missing off the ferrite antenna. So this was kind of a messy, sloppy, crappy video, but sometimes repair is like that, and especially a resurrection where someone else had worked on it and you found it sitting in an abandoned spot. So there you go. Sony TR712 brought back to life, sort of.
At Mike Diamond. I'm Mike Diamond. I guarantee my plumbers will show up on time and unclog your sink for $99. Covers the world. It's 4 o'clock. This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by the Capital One Eno card.
I'm Sam Litzinger. President Trump now says he'll delay mass deportation raids scheduled for tomorrow. He tweets at the request of Democrats, I have delayed the illegal immigration removal process, deportation, for 2 weeks to see if the Democrats and Republicans can get together and work out a solution to the asylum and loophole problems. He says if they can't, deportations start.
CBS News correspondent Nicole Killian.
These raids were getting a lot of pushback. The president did respond to that a little earlier today, saying that he's aware that these cities are going to fight it, and he shot back saying, generally these are cities with high crime.
House Speaker Pelosi phoned Mr. Trump last night to ask him not to proceed with the raids. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans tells us about a deadly plane crash in Hawaii.
Oh my God.
Moments after the crash, cell phone video shows wreckage of the twin-engine Beechcraft engulfed in flame.
Oh, God, there's a plane. It was taking off. Shortly after is when it went down, and it's